We appreciate you joining us. My name is Norman Harris. I'm the managing partner of the Holleran Group. We're an African-American owned urban land development company. And as co-developers of the Park Hill Golf Course, the Holleran Group is advocating to create a new model of development that provides equitable outcomes for all stakeholders. The property is currently zoned to be an 18-hole regulation golf course, but we believe this land presents an opportunity to do a lot more. I grew up in Park Hill, and for many years, my choices for food near my home led me to 7-Eleven, fast food restaurants, and corner stores. Some of my peers share the same experiences of stuffing Dorito bags with chili cheese sauce coupled with Slurpee big gulps. I deserved better options then, and we deserve better options now. Park Hill Golf Course is 155 acres and is large enough to accommodate a large park, as well as help address some of the critical needs in the Northeast Park Hill neighborhood, including a lack of affordable housing, economic investment, and access to fresh, healthy foods. The purpose of tonight's event is to collaborate with local food justice leaders to provide an educational opportunity to understand how systemic racism has played a role in the creation of food deserts and to spark interest in food literacy being provided by local leaders. Tonight's 1-hour panel will be facilitated by Darcie Ezell, who's a community engagement coordinator at the Dahlia Campus for Health and Wellbeing for the Mental Health Center of Denver. Now, we chose tonight's panelists from personal connections that we have with local leaders who each have their own unique role they are playing in the food cycle and who are passionate about food justice work. So without further ado, I'm just going to pass it over to Darcie, and thank you again for joining us.
Hi, everybody, and thanks for joining us this evening. Like Norm said, my name is Darcie Ezell, and I work at the Dahlia Campus for Health and Wellbeing. The campus has been here for 5 years, and we have 3 farms here at the campus. We have an aquaponics farm, we have a acre production farm, and we also have a big chunk of land that's farmed by Mo Betta Green Marketplace. And the reason for the farms is because we did 2 years of outreach with the neighbors before we built. And in the questions of barriers to wellness, what would you like to see in your neighborhood? The very first thing that came up was food. So to address that, because it is a food desert. So address that, we in essence have 3 farms. So what I'm going to do, just for the sake of time, I'm going to introduce the panelists this evening, and then we'll move right into questions, and then they can kind of introduce themselves when they're answering the questions. We have a very robust panel this evening. So first off, we have Ricardo Rocha with Bondadosa. Bondadosa is on a mission to create a more sustainable Colorado food ecosystem. Founded in 2017, Bondadosa is a social enterprise that harnesses the power of Colorado's community of producers, growers, and small businesses. Hi, Ricardo. We also have DJ Cavem from Vita Farm Foundation. When DJ Cavem coined the term eco-hip-hop in 2007, he didn't know it would sprout into a global movement. His mission is to rap about climate change, food justice, and plant-based foods, spreads far beyond his Denver hometown, and is on a mission to combat the food deserts, the health epidemic deeply impacting people of color communities with an urban garden initiative. We also have Emerald Gardens here this evening. Emerald Gardens are young farmers passionate about sustainability and committed to harvesting the finest organically grown microgreens using passive solar energy with a mission to cultivate, engage, and transform communities throughout the Denver Boulder area with year-round access to delicious and nutritious microgreens. We also have Family Tree Food Market here this evening. Family Tree Market is a natural and organic product retailer with a goal to reduce nutrition-related chronic diseases. And they believe that the food industry has a role to play in this fight. They believe community health is a critical part of economic development. If your health is compromised, then so too is your ability to support your family. We have Flora Marquez here with Mo Betta Green Marketplace. And Mo Betta Green is a 10-year-old urban mobile farmer market founded on 3 principles: food literacy, environmental stewardship, and social responsibility. And lastly, we have Sow Sistas, a Sista-owned co-op focused on garden leadership, training, and supporting food sovereignty sovereignty in all communities. This intergenerational social club is creating food producers, gardening education, certifications, and services in horticultural wellness. So those are our panelists this evening. I have to say that at Dahlia here, we've worked with the majority of this group. It's kind of like a family, and we're just gonna go right into the first question. I think this will go to Bondadosa first. Conversations are shifting from food deserts to food apartheid. In your experience, how has systemic racism played a role in access to food? Ricardo.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for having me. And thank you so much for hosting Bondadosa and his panel. I think this conversation is going to be incredibly exciting. Please excuse any background noise. I was in the middle in between meetings and I had to kind of make a pit stop. Food apartheid and how does racism play a role? I think it plays a role at the root. It plays literally at the root of how neighborhoods are built, how assumptions are made about these neighborhoods, and how the neighborhoods are then developed. And so I think for me, a driving factor as to individuals, specifically those of color in the Black communities, is through the lens of racism, and that racism in the way it paves the road.
Ricardo, you're really cutting out on us.
Ricardo, you can try turning off your camera. Sometimes that helps with the audio.
Let me know if this is better. Is this better?
Much.
Is this much
yes.
better? Okay, awesome.
Yes.
Sorry about that. But what I was saying is that racism can be traced at the root. What I was saying was that that we can talk about redlining and how that played a role in the development of neighborhoods, and then how we can also talk about how certain formulas are used to determine whether or not a grocery store is a viable solution for a neighborhood, and whether or not it determines whether or not there's going to be a grocery store in that neighborhood. And so we can race is the cornerstone of most systemic problems, I think, in my opinion. And if we don't address that at the root, and we don't first talk about that, then we can't begin to move forward to what a more sustainable food system looks like. It's definitely something that I believe in, and that we believe in at Bondadosa.
Thank you, Ricardo. DJ Cavem, would you like to add anything onto the question?
First of all, thank you for having me. I think it's an interesting conversation to have around like the connection between social justice and, urban agriculture, let alone like the ideas of opportunity and how, access is really, the core of all of that. If you think about like the history of this country, there's a lot of historical references that lead towards people being marginalized and separated. But as you see, a lot more people are actually interested in like holistic health and sustainability. A lot of times those opportunities don't show up into, low-income communities until gentrification actually takes part. And because Colorado is, of course, it's the wild, wild west, there's a lot of opportunity here on how people have been involved in urban agriculture since the beginning of this state. But I feel like nowadays that when we're thinking about providing green spaces and green roofs and what sustainability looks like, it doesn't really look as diverse as it actually could be. And I feel like the qualities of what's happening within environmental sustainability and racism being at the core of it, I feel the best work for us to do right now is really to focus on like what it looks like on a regenerative perspective. How we regenerating the soil, regenerating the people, creating cooperative economics by employing and instilling the ideas of how to support each other through urban farming and sustainability through holistic health. So I feel like, it's always going to be a flip. You might see things, continue to shift, but we live in a country where, it's ingrained in our historical demographic of how our neighborhoods are set up. and actually at the same time, how gentrification is playing a big role on what communities are being developed on as we speak. So, you know, all power to the people. Let's see what happens in the future.
Thank you. It's good to see you. Emerald Gardens, would you like to add anything to this particular question?
Oh, yes. Hi, my name is Irving. I'm representing Roberto for today. And so one of the ways that we're working at with in Emerald Gardens is that we want to be able to help people in the community create their own farms, and then that way they can be participant in the food production as rather than just waiting, and that way to be able to help them to market and sell their the food that they produce in the to their own community or to other areas in the market.
Great, thank you very much. Is there any of the other panelists that would like to add anything to that conversation?
I actually would. Food desert is a pretty specific definition if you kind of look at, you know, what that is. And I feel like the apartheid piece gets into a broader, you know, discussion. So in many respects, they're very much one and the same. An extension of sort of not dealing with some of those underlying issues can lead to sort of these broader, more complicated sort of problems. So I just kind of wanted to introduce that thought, but food deserts, it's very narrow, the definition of it in terms of a lack of access versus some of the complications that food apartheid gets into.
You know, I want to add something to that. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Great. Khalid Morris and myself, we're both with Family Tree Market. And, you know, on the surface, we're addressing the disparities that are associated with living in a food desert. And even not only a food desert, but a food swamp, right? That's on the surface. But on the bigger scale, Family Tree Market is addressing food apartheid. And there is a huge distinction between the strategies that are important to address both. I love what Derek Cooper said. He's a food activist. He talked about three main things when it comes to food apartheid. He said, first of all, food apartheid is really the systematic destruction of self-determination to control our food. So this included like land, resources, theft, and of course, yes, discrimination is part of that. He also talked about hypersaturation of destructive foods and predatory marketing in our community. And so when we talk about millions and billions of dollars pushing certain products, making it affordable, going into our communities, it's hard to fight against that sometimes, especially when you're dealing with the stressors, the economic, social stressors of life. But then also even just looking at the blatant discriminatory corporate controlled food system that results in our community suffering from some of the highest rates of heart disease and diabetes of all times. And so what we're trying to do at Family Tree Market, while we are creating a grocery store where we control the food, how it's placed on the shelves, the pricing strategy to promote people to choose healthier outcomes as opposed to healthier products as opposed to unhealthy products. And you're really taking a public health initiative to what we call behavioral modification. Again, helping people go from unhealthier behaviors to healthier behaviors. We can make the difference. But to address the apartheid issue, we have to go further. And so we're really looking at working with landowners or acquiring land to do more growing, to get us a food security by promoting minority-owned land and farmers to create that food, helping them to grow as we grow so that we can secure our source across the country to get the food from where it's growing into our store. And so to be able to own the entire supply chain, the pipeline from farm to retail, that's the solution. The last piece that we're doing is we're also collecting data, 1, 3, 5, 10-year study to look at the impact that our store design, our characteristics, our intervention is having on the community so that we can drive public policy to support that and to advocate for that, to perhaps even evaluate the stores, the environment that influences healthy choices and healthy decision making for families that lead to healthier health outcomes. And therefore, if your store is rated this way, you know that if you walk in that store, you're more inclined to have a better health outcome for your family. And to maybe support funding or tax breaks for stores who are taking on that calling to do better and create a healthier environment. So yeah, that's a little bit more that we wanted to share. But there's two fronts of attack, food desert and food apartheid, and it's needed.
Thank you, Daniel. Yeah, we're going to be talking about policy a little bit later in the hour, but for now, Flora, how has Mo Betta been able to promote food literacy in community?
Yeah, well, I guess from the last question, it's pretty clear that food access and racism overall has a huge impact on health and community health. And so the data's there. We don't really have to argue that. I feel like that's really, really clear. And so one of the things that Mo Betta really does is educate and support and cultivate community and really weave in the networks so that people in the community, including youth, well, from young children to, whatever age group, has the opportunity to get engaged with the food system. So it can be from participating in a garden to attending one of our food cooking classes at the Dahlia. Pre-COVID, we used to have demonstrations at the Dahlia, and it was just really beautiful to see people interacting with food, cooking food, juicing, learning about juicing, and just really participating in whatever step of the process, whether it's planting a seed or eating a fresh meal. So I feel like that's one of the ways that we definitely are able to promote food literacy. In addition to that, we make it so that it's really accessible for people to be able to participate. So for example, we have about 25 paid youth employees who work with us every single season, and they are able to participate in the entire process, from weeding and cleaning up a garden to through the summer, and then taking it out and whatever's involved with the farm stands and farmers markets and all of that. So it really is a huge system. It's complicated and it's hard to access sometimes. And I think at Mo Betta, we definitely try to make it as accessible as possible by getting people involved and participating hands-on.
Thank you. Yeah, and I think music is a big piece of that, right? Bev always has a lot of DJs and music, and makes it really fun for people to come and engage in the cooking classes and things like that. Robin, did you want to add anything about food literacy and the work that you're doing?
Sure, I'd be happy to add something about that. I want to thank you, first of all, for having me here at this table. The Sow Sistas are the baby of this group, so y'all just get used to seeing us, and we are very excited to take in all this information as it relates to food literacy. So, the Sow Sistas were born out of a marriage between my own private personal coaching business, garden coaching business, and the Girl Trade Gardeners organization. And we started a mentee mentor program, and the way that the Sow Sistas address it is by direct education. We very specifically and directly, we teach the women, and actually, so exciting, I can't hardly talk about it. We build our whole platform around 7 principles of food sovereignty. It's all these words, right? This vocabulary. See, when you say food, when I hear food desert, as a growing person and as a minister, a desert is not a negative place for me. A desert is just a different type of terrain. It's alive. It just has a different type of living. It has a different type of landscape, different types of animals. But when I hear food apartheid, I hear a systemic, I hear diabolical, a very intentional political effort to, in this case around food, to keep us trapped in bad health and making bad food choices very intentionally. So that's when I think about apartheid. So with the Sow Sistas, we're teaching the people directly how to grow, specifically, how does that impact your environment? Where the more green things we grow, the more the better impact it is on the environment. If you all know about Professor Wangari Maathai, you know, they planted 50 million trees in Kenya, and it has actually infected the entire global environment. So we do those things very specifically. We even just picked up a contract last night, and we're going to be working with a transitional home for women and trans women, and we're going to we create a certification called plot manager, but they are going to be trained, and we're going to help them actually create a garden in their yard. And so what we do is not just teach you how to dig, we teach you, take you to the science. We teach you the science, we teach you, you have to start with the science and then you build from there. So that's what the Sow Sistas are doing, you know, implicitly via social media. For years, the people have been seeing me sharing about the food and making your choices. And now we're being very explicit and going out and recruiting sisters, young girls, Black women and girls specifically to come and get this information. We're creating food producers, because food sovereignty, the principles that we, you know, I said all these definitions of the 7 principles, one of them has to do with honoring food producers. So we're teaching them how to grow the food, how the food benefits your body, and how to even sell the food, how to process the food, and how to sell the food. And we want to introduce to the children in particular, to know that there are jobs, there's careers, there's work to be made in this food literacy. It's not just about what to eat, how it affects the environment, and what part do we each play as an individual. And that's pretty much what we're doing with the Sow Sistas around food literacy, just being excited to spread the word. Now I get to evangelize around food as well. I'm excited about it. Thank you.
That's great, Robin. Thank you. So DJ Cavem, in what ways do urban farms contribute to the improved health of communities?
Hold on, repeat that last part.
Sure. In what ways do urban farms contribute to the improved health of their communities?
How to improve health? Well,
yeah,
multiple different ways. Let's see, you know, doing this work in 5 Points, I would say probably since like 2002, organized that Brown Sugar Youth Festival. You know what I mean? I think it was really important to talk to people about urban agronomy, you know what I'm saying? And the ideas of what it looks like to inner city forage. And growing up in the East Side, there was always a lot of just fruit trees everywhere, you know? And so I had a lot of access. And a lot of times I feel like, you know, people just really didn't take advantage of that. And the elders were always the ones who wanted to instill that intergenerational dialogue. And so when I looked at it, you know what I mean, I was looking at the prolonged life of like a lot of my friends and family who were predominantly eating out of their garden. You know, not only their memory was increased, but the fact that they were just so agile and athletic at older age, I feel like it was something to adopt. Green spaces in general, of course, will continue to increase, like, you know, the ideas of like mental wellness in the community, let alone just creating that accessibility to like what it looks like to have, you know, the holistic health providers. I'll be real with you, you know what I'm saying? Growing up, going to everything from Donnie Super to Ben's Supermarket, like, you know, the freshest thing for a while for sure was a lemon in the liquor store. And, you know, partnering up with many different urban farmers and selling my own greens at Mo Betta Farmers Market at the same time gave me accessibility to actually watch the community transform. I had people who, you know, were like juicing the greens that I was growing and like eating the corn that I was growing and then harvesting the seeds from the cucumbers and like, and the things like that. It continues to create the opportunity to make business, you know what I mean, straight up. And I think the best thing about that is watching people actually take it to another level. Like, you know, as a musician, I've been able to like go back and forth from being, you know, a chef, from, you know, being a farmer, and then like using that idea of that lifestyle to write about through music. And recently, you know, after doing so much community development, my main project has been to supply people with organic seeds. And that was the last thing that I did. It was to focus around what it looks like to grow food in the hood. So for instance, this is one of the packages. This is the first certified USDA organic hip hop album. The album is called Biomimics. It's dedicated to biomimicry. There's a QR code on the back that goes directly to an album that teaches people how to grow food. So using art for social change to talk about it, graffiti and murals also help encourage people to actually think about beauty and their own community. And I think that, flowers and sunflowers can do the same power. We just gotta like really open up to our ideas of really working our soul. And it's good for the young people too. We need the intergenerational dialogue around times like these where we're actually losing the conversation. I gotta say that's for real. We're losing out on finding like the real deal, connection between the source, and that's the soil and the sunlight. And I feel like, once we start to get back to that, a lot of the things for us seeking knowledge on how to take care of our health, which also comes from the soil and the water we eat. I got mad respect for everybody in the medical field, but I've been looking up to the witch doctors and to the shamans and to the curanderas and all the people who've been really like healing people since the beginning of time, using herbs and teas, to address all of our our present problems with ancient wisdom. So that's what I'm all about. You know what I'm saying?
Food is medicine. Yeah. Flora, with Mo Betta being in 2 different communities, how would you say urban gardens improve the health of communities?
I've actually been thinking about this a lot lately because I'm supporting a food systems project between Cole and Park Hill and the Globeville and Hilaria Swansea kind of neighborhoods. And it's just like, people don't just live in isolation from, their neighborhoods. They go back and forth. And especially if you don't have access to a full service grocery store nearby, you actually have to drive far to find fresh food, or if you don't have a car, you have to take the bus or whatever method you need to. And so it's just really important to have little hubs of open space where people can gather and just have access to fresh food at all. But I've noticed, in addition to people just being able to purchase our produce at the farm stands and farmers markets, like, people want to be around each other, and people want to know that their children can know their neighbors and that they can have access to some type of programming or support, or even just having a place to go hang out on a Wednesday evening with other kids and play, and so it creates an ecosystem where people can talk to each other, where they can feel safe, where they can learn, where people can not be in such isolation. And I think COVID even brought this out more, so that we need each other and that we need to be with each other in all of these different ways. So, fortunately, we were able to still produce food this year or last season, and then hold farm stands throughout the year. So we had 3 weekly farm stands. And, they were really well attended. And in part, I think it really was because people needed to be around each other and to support each other and know that it was going to be okay, that we were going to get through this. And, and we just got such great feedback of how needed it was to just be able to go pull weeds at the garden on a Sunday afternoon, and so it really, I think, beyond the fresh food access, it's this sense of connectedness to the people around you, and a sense of responsibility that we owe it to ourselves and to each other to really show up authentically and put down all of our identities and the guards that we have to carry around all the time, and just have a connection with the earth and with each other that is deeper than whatever, this kind of superficial layer of conversation that we kind of tend to draw our conversations off of. So it is something bigger and deeper than just a garden, it is connection and it's nourishment, not just for the body, but for your spirit.
Thank you. I see a lot of nodding heads there. Ricardo, did you want to add to this conversation?
Of course, the way that we our people grow the food already within this food system. So for me, I take the approach of like, that is my uncle, my grandpa, my grandpa's grandpa has been has in somewhere or another built the food system and contributed to the food system already. So what the way that we approach it is, what is the infrastructure? And I'm talking about a supply chain now. How do we heal those things, right? Like, how do we try to address things from there's a lot of growers in the panel and a lot of people who are manufacturing and creating food, but how do we leverage storage, delivery, and distribution and delivery as a vehicle to kind of support this new food system? Because what I've seen and what I've learned is that there are plenty of gardens, plenty of urban gardens, there are growers everywhere, but what we don't have is a shared infrastructure that we own, that our value, that we drive with our own values, that are going to fuel this new food system. And so for Bondadosa, I think, you know, our name means to be kind, not just, you know, to the soil, but to the people who work that, so to the supply chain that then distributes that food, and then eventually to the recipients who are receiving it. You know, we perform something like 30,000 deliveries per month, and what I think has been really interesting is to see how we can leverage the recipients to be recipients of this new food system. And so I'm eager to find out how this development and this project is going to help support that. At the end of the day, in my opinion, and this might be a little bit controversial, only about 10 to 15% of a grocery store is fresh produce. We're talking about an 80% of the store that needs to be in some way or another replaced by a healthier food system. And so I think it's going to be really interesting to see how we've taken upon ourselves to recreate this new food system with these values that Flor was talking about, and deliver, hopefully, over the next 5 to 10 years. Why not? I think it's definitely possible.
Yeah. So what is the best way, I think, Irving, you might have something to say about this. What's the best way that people can eat fresh year round?
Yes, so one of the best ways is to help them be able to access the food easily, either by through food boxes delivery, through accessing like drop-off locations, or even in local groceries. As one of the things that we did in the East Summer Food Hub was that during the winter we sourced a lot of food products from local farms and from neighborhood states like New Mexico, where when we couldn't access fresh food in season from Colorado farms. So if you don't make it easy and convenient for people to access it, then they're just not gonna do it. If it's a farmer's market stand that's 8 to 5 on the weekends and not when during times when people are working, then it makes it really difficult for them.
Yep. Yeah, we used to sell pre-COVID, we used to sell about 30 food boxes a week, and now we're selling about 90. And now that we're doing deliveries, it just keeps growing and growing and growing. Since we do have the greenhouse, we do have the year-round production, it really makes a difference. I'm sorry, I cut something off.
Sorry, can I go ahead and jump in, Darcie? My
Please.
name is Salvador Gonzalez. Thank you for hosting this event and having this space. And I'm here along with Irvin from Emerald Gardens, and I've been helping the East Denver Food Hub with some of the initiatives. And this is really connected to the work that we're trying to do right now, is how can we have a local product be available year round, and make it so that the farmer also is able to cover the cost from this. How can it be fair for them? So what we're trying to do with the hub, speaking to some of the things that Ricardo has already spoken to, how can we connect the whole chain? How can we create this new system and really reinforce those mechanisms of local ownership, and especially support BIPOC farmers? And what we do there is at the Food Hub, we work with many different local farmers who have good growing practices, and we connect them to community resources and people who are in need of this food, and really take on that ownership of being able to take food from the farmers, because farmers are busy enough. I myself as a farmer know this, that when you grow and during the growing season, you don't have enough time to be able to market and also distribute. So it's nice to be able to come in and connect those links there. And food choices is an economic, it has to do with the economic viability, economic background and of who we are, right? So we know that these lead to bad health outcomes, and many times we don't have access to healthy food. So this is another way of really working with the whole food system, is how can we cover for those who don't have or have limited access in a way that's fair and equitable.
Great. I actually have thought, I would like to interject, that's Salvador, great feedback and great thoughts about people who don't have access. Erica, she actually asked a question, she had directed a question towards me, and it really brings up a really good point. The new terms that she asked about was Food Mirage. And so for those who are unaware of what Food Mirage is, it's when the people in the community have access to healthy foods, but it's not affordable. So therefore the illusion of access, right? There's no execution and the ability to buy and consume in a way that gets the individual the help that they need. And so that really for me speaks to the supply chain. It speaks to all of our growers at the ground level, all of our manufacturers, our producers, and even the stores. I think we need to come together and partner to find efficiencies and how we operate, how we produce. We need to weed out those expensive costs, unnecessary costs, find always innovation in how we produce and how we get our product from the ground, from our factories, from our warehouses to the store, or just simply to the customer. So then that way, they can consume more of it. At the end of the day, when it comes down to it, food does not have to be expensive. It's expensive often because of our inefficiencies in how we produce, how we get our products to the customer. And so if we can weave out those unnecessary costs and then partner with the retailers and partner throughout the supply chain to find innovations and improvements, we can win together. And I think that's what is the next step in really eradicating food mirages for communities who now have access but still can't afford it.
Hey, Daniel, I'd love to add a little bit of that. Is that okay? Who's
Absolutely.
next? Yes. Was you Salvador?
You're next, Ricardo.
Awesome. Well, I just wanted to say, Daniel, you're absolutely right. What we found over the span of our deliveries over the last 4 years is that almost all people spend the same amount of money on food. It doesn't matter if you're low income, high income, white, black. It doesn't matter where you live either. You spend the same amount of money on food. I believe the statistic is something about $338 per month in areas like GES, for example. And what's really interesting to me is that there's a full I'm going to describe it as a full spectrum of how people spend food. There are individuals who are on the left side of the spectrum who are using things like SNAP benefits, WIC, double up food bucks. I mean, all the things that we know are to come from the federal government and federal programs that we've been able to use, and other entities have been able to use very disproportionately, have been able to use and take advantage of it. Of those kinds of things. I'm talking about the 7-Elevens of the world, the Dollar Trees of the world, who are getting away with processing SNAP benefits by selling apples at the register with a markup. So I think that's one side of the spectrum. The other side of the spectrum is that full autonomous individual who can say, it doesn't matter where I live, I can get access to the food that I want and I can pay for it. And at the end of the day, they all spend about the same amount of money. It just depends on who pays for it. On this side of the spectrum, it's all of us. We all pay for it. And on this side of the spectrum, only a certain people can and will afford that supply chain. And what we've found is that it's fragmented. It's that it's built for various stages of that spectrum. And so what I'd like to push the group is to talk about like how we can take advantage of various funding mechanisms and leveraging different types of financial vehicles to enable this new supply chain to exist. Because one grant at a time, to be quite honest with you, won't get us there. We do have to rapid prototype our way into a new food system. However, we must have a financial backer, whether that be the USDA, WIC, or a bank, or an investor, or even, for example, the Colorado Health Foundation. Why are they not investing their endowment in companies like Emerald Gardens, companies like Family Tree, companies like us? Like that incentive and incentivizing the food system in that way, I think is going to unlock some interesting dollars here. So I think for me, one, we got to stop just talking about gardens. We have to stop talking just about farming. I think it's incredibly important. We have to start talking about the supply chain. We have to start talking about the financial vehicles that are going to get us there. Again, we're not going to grant our way into a new food system. We kind of have to take it.
Well, I wanted to jump in from a retailer's perspective, because a lot of this dovetails into insecurity aspect. I know from COVID, we're working with Montbello, full disclosure, working with Montbello Fresh Flow Hub to build out a community-led development in Montbello, and it's grocery anchored with the grocery arm of that development, but it's also includes Mental Health Center Denver, Colorado Black Performance Arts Center, and as well as some residents. And so it's a big initiative. And one of the things that really drew us to them was their urban farming capacity as a retailer. They're doing already in the Montbello community a lot of urban farming. I couple urban farming also with community kitchens. I know that's a big deal, and that's something that I know the Park Hill community is really getting in front of a lot of. That's very, very important to the supply chain of a grocery store. When you go back to COVID, a lot of shelves were empty. Why? How could that happen? Well, a lot of farmers, what happens in that distribution cycle is they'll send their food products to the distribution centers around the country, right? So in many respects, a lot of our food goes to California, and it kind of sits in those storage areas, and it just sort of waits for someone to kind of make that executive decision on where it should go, when really it's down the street from our homes, or our food centers, our places. And so urban farms are in our minds, from Family Tree's perspective, a great solution to minimize, not just in terms of affordability, but minimize the supply chain, so that we can get food in shorter distances, shorter spades, fresher food closer to the end user, and working with the community to do so. So the producers are suppliers in the community. Now, where they decide on where their supplies go, but they're largely, in our eyes, suppliers, vendors of sorts, to be able to kind of give food back to the community when they're growing it themselves from an urban perspective, or even those community kitchens that are developing their own satellite kind of food products, food entrepreneurial type of products. Those are all ways to make sure that even in depressed situations like a pandemic, the community has greater access and greater control of their food supply, and it doesn't have to necessarily go to other states where there's more population or whatever the case may be. It can kind of stay in the community because we're already growing our food ourselves, or cooking a lot of our foods ourselves.
I love that point around the food system. I just want to share one quick example. It's in partnership with the East Denver Food Hub. When the pandemic happened, there was about 600 bags of basic produce boxes stuck in our warehouse because they couldn't go out the next day. And they were supposed to go out 3 days later after the pandemic and everything kind of shut down. I will say that Bondadosa, the East Denver Food Hub, and the Grow House in a shared warehouse location had the largest supply of eggs and food for the first 7 days, and it was literally down the street. Khalid, it is exactly what you're talking about. It's that whole thing. Like, not only are we rebuilding a food system, we just have to build it even more efficiently. We have to quickly deploy these resources to the right communities. And here's the kicker on all of this, and I'm a little ashamed to say this out loud, but that food didn't go to community. We know where that food came from, and where it came from, and where it went. It went to individuals who could pay for it. And so that's why, again, I think it's rethinking how we finance this is such a huge problem to tackle. That's all I had to say. Thanks.
I would really love to add to the responsibility that corporations, city, private companies, developers and just like neighborhood associations and all of the different partners that are involved in a certain project, like it takes a collective responsibility. And I think that a lot of the conversation is often in like personal choices and what people choose to eat, or it's like, you know, really not looking at focusing on how the financial ecosystem currently exists is wrong, and how a lot of this kind of choice or whatever responsibility is placed on like the farmer solely or the grocery store or whatever. It's a really a collective responsibility and an agreement that really needs to be made across the board to create the infrastructure that's needed for these ecosystems to actually work and be sustainable. So that means investors like foundations, and also the city, and also developers, and also all of the different people involved actually committing to making a little bit less profit to make something like this functional. And really it's about people committing to making less money, because that's the truth, you know. And so I think it's exciting to think about the possibility that these conversations are happening. And also, you know, there's a reason why community members don't trust big institutions and folks who are having these conversations in the first place. And we really need to just take accountability as community partners, as the people who are having these conversations, and say, hey, like I actually commit to making this happen, whatever it looks like, let's figure it out. But committing that we're making this collective effort, because honestly, it's not going to change unless we put our money there, and that means all of us.
I would just challenge the not necessarily making less money. It's just it's because margins are involved here, right? So if I grow something myself, it's actually cheaper and more affordable. So you can still make money. You just have to make it smarter and stop making a lot of our food products so bloated with all of these weird marketing costs. And, you know, we're selling to the community, and that should be our target market, right? Not this national brand. And so I think that there is plenty of ways to make it smartly and efficiently, kind of to your point, right? It takes a combined collective effort though. And so I fully agree that we all have to work together, and you have to kind of get retailers, distributors, those groups on point and on the same page with the community in order to kind of maximize the overall value, not in terms of profits, but in terms of just community and well-being and just all of the things that kind of go into a community health.
I just wanted to build on that. I just wanted to build on that just a little bit, because it almost feels like because I hear like a retailer position, you know, coming across, and that's, you know, that's who's here with us today. But I come from a community perspective, right? And not to be in competition with those of you who are selling in retail stores, but the power is in us being able to know how to grow and manage our own food in my own yard, in my own pot. It starts there. And I'm a strong advocate for community gardens, and not in a competition with the grocery stores, because someone already said it's more than just growing the food. It's more than that. You're learning leadership. You're learning how to get along with folk. You're learning how to manage your time. You're learning science. You're learning math. You're learning art. You know, you're learning you're learning the mental well-being. So we have a mental wellness component. That's how we got that contract, because of the horticultural therapy piece that we have with the Sow Sistas. It is everything we have, and everyone is saying it right. And I'm sure that's why we're here tonight. We have to yield ourselves to figure out, I'm not even gonna say figure out, I'm gonna say to hear and receive how we can do this together. How we can do this together, because I need the lady next door to be able to grow her own food, because when the stuff jumps off, I don't want her coming over the fence to get my food, right? I want to have, when I was living in Park Hill, there was no grocery store walking distance. There's plenty of neighborhoods that you can't walk and get some place to eat. So if we would be intentional about educating the people, you're always going to hear me talk about teaching them. So we're having this conversation amongst each other. The people, the folk don't know what we're talking about. What are you talking about? What are you talking about? And so it's our responsibility as a group to all this that we all have together to synergize that piece, right? And I want to be a part of helping to activate the people, and everything that everyone said is involved. But until we connect, you know, Susie Q next door, you know, and him ho down the road, until we connect the regular folk, consistently connect them, give them an incentive to connect. I'm not gonna say until, I'm gonna say when that happens, that's when we're gonna have this food victory. I'm gonna say this last thing. Food has been used as a weapon against people around the world for centuries. And the more that we are able to manage our own ability to grow our food, eat our food, sell our food, you know what I'm saying, the better that we are going to be as a community. I'm talking about Denver, you know, 5 points in the house, whoop, whoop, right? And Colorado, the more that we're able to do all that together. So I'm very grateful for this platform. I'm grateful for every person that's watching and every person that has contributed something to this conversation. And I'm looking forward to seeing what each of us individually have how we are going to synergize that. Because I know the Sow Sistas have something to bring to this table. We may not have all the vocabulary yet, but the vocabulary is going to be something different in 6 weeks anyway, right? And so just raise your hand if you want to, you know, grow and make it be about the people. If we're going to make some money too now, don't misunderstand me, because I told you the Sow Sistas are creating food producers. Those are folk that get paid to grow food. Okay, I'm done. Had to get that out.
If I can jump in real quick, if I can make a quick comment, Robin,
Sure,
I appreciate all that you have said. And, you know, one of the things that Clea and I have talked about is to often make sure that people understand we are a grassroots retail store. I am a survivor of food apartheid, lived in a food desert, food swamp for a number of years. I know firsthand, decided to go to school to get a master's in public health and an MBA for the purpose of addressing health disparities of underserved communities. And so we are the community. And the amazing thing about Khalil and our experiences, we've also seen Park Hill across the country. Whether it's called 5 Points, whether it's called the Hill District, whether it's the south side of Fairbanks, Alaska, we see the same systemic issues, the same messaging, the same stage of development in different communities. And so when you recognize that, you realize, okay, we got to find a working model and then get it across the country. And so that's where we're at. We're taking a local approach, but a national perspective on how we can address all of the Park Hills across the country. That's why policy, data collection is so important. But, you know, from an individual food security standpoint, it is important to make sure that individual residents have the capacity to grow food in case there's a pandemic that shuts the system down. You gotta know this. But then when individuals grow their food for themselves and there's excess, that excess can be purposely brought together and then still put into the stores for people who don't have the capacity, because sometimes people won't have that capacity or they need more because there's a family size. So there is still a relationship and connection that your organization and Family Tree Market can make. We just need to formalize it and start getting to the work.
Thank you, everybody. Great conversation.
That was dope. I just to level in, I feel where y'all coming from. You know, I think it's important. We do know that there is a mental health connection between nutritional deficiency. We do know that people in Flint, Michigan, as much as we want to grow food, they got political issues, the reason why it might be hard for them to grow food. And we understand that, like, if we put this in perspective of how people are still dealing with not having access to, you know, health access and really making that connection between food is medicine, look at where we are. You know what I mean? People don't really trust the government on what's going on with science right now, but they definitely trust the urban farmer. And thinking about that perspective leads it into, like, what are we going to do about waste diversion? All right. Mm-hmm. So growing food is one thing, composting and recycling is a whole nother. If I'm eating a gang of like processed food that's available in the corner store, in the bodegas where I'm from, And then like, you know, all these Mylar bags, I can't compost that, I can't recycle that. Now supporting urban farmers, man, you got a traceable source. You can compost that, you can put that right back in the garden. Sequestering that carbon, creating the bioremediation is all we really need in the hood right now. Especially you got all these young people who are marching, dedicated to ditching school every day just so they can march against climate change. There's so much links between the intersectionality between deforestation, environmental justice, the people who work in these meat processing plants who don't have health care, the people who work in pesticide sprayed farms that don't have health care. And at the same time, we're thinking about why it's important for us to like really think about urban farming. Yo, on the real, like this is more than just a social justice issue. You need access to water, food, clothing, and shelter. And a lot of that systematic racism does come from, you know, the way that we separated 23rd block in Denver, Colorado. Let's just be real. But at the end of the day, what we definitely need outside of the infrastructure that was put in place, like the Grow House, was been there for many years, help establish the Seed to Seed program with Adam Brock. But the whole goal, what we did that for, is because we saw that these kids lived within like literally less than 3 miles for them to even find access to like a bell pepper or anything like that that was like traceable source. So the goal is to create access. And when you do that, you're able to like basically create those situations of cooperative economics. The profit margin of me being able to flood the street with some seeds was important. You know what I mean? I'm gonna be real. Right before what happened with the civil unrest in Minneapolis, I shipped hella seeds to Minneapolis to some urban farmers. They already had seeds in the ground by the time all the grocery stores was burnt down. And they were able to feed their community out of the co-ops. And so being able to continue that conversation, no matter what's going on, being able to help your family and your friends is definitely imperative. But we got to sequester carbon, not just in urban atmospheres, rural community, and creating that intergenerational dialogue is so important because we need to apply indigenous perspectives so that we can actually work out our issues. So a lot of people don't know how to go back to the land. We got cellular memory that's in our DNA that's trapping us from actually unlocking that brilliance between why Africans in America were enslaved to be able to grow food, along with categorize with our indigenous brothers and sisters to be able to create better harvests and yield. And why a lot of our brothers and sisters who came from the South, who came to Colorado for ranching, is also in our agricultural history. So we got to know a lot about that and why we can actually get back to the land. But without all that being said, composting is the next key to everybody want to eat more vegetables, and that's on the streets or life.
I love that. The only thing I would say, DJ Cavem, is why are we so good at picking up trash and we're not as good as delivering healthy food? And it's a mind shift because we care about our public health, and we need to change our mindset in the fact in how we see giving people for healthy food. Because if we can figure out picking up trash from every single household in the state of Colorado and every single household in Park Hill, then we should be able to figure out how to deliver high quality, nutritious food to the very same household. We can show up and take something with us too. So I love to leave that question to the group because I can't wrap my mind around it. I think there's a there.
You know, I know that's what I'm saying. I'm giving away seeds. I want anybody want to grow food, get at me. Especially Sow Sistas. I got seeds for y'all. I'm gonna be plugging everybody who trying to drop seeds. No doubt. One love.
The funny part to that, Ricardo, for me is just always trying to understand what is healthy, right? Like, you know, when the COVID vaccine hit, okay, everybody had problems with, I don't want to take the vaccine or do want to take the vaccine. We were reading very intently on how would this impact me. With pharmaceuticals in general, we don't just take pharmaceuticals. There's always a bunch of disclaimers. This could do this to you. This could do that to you. I mean, what we put in our body matters, but we don't necessarily know how that impacts. We don't necessarily know that as it relates to our food. So, you know, even our common stuff, even good stuff like an orange, like how does that impact me, or how is that going to impact my health condition as I have it? We don't always know. And a lot of times we take it for granted. I like to think that we take our food for granted with respect to health and with respect to impacts that food has on health. And in our mind, Family Tree, we believe that food is medicine. because it is. And you look at the ingredients, your body breaks down food just like it does anything else, and it just gets down into vitamins and minerals. And I think we need better mechanisms in place to kind of help consumers in general understand what is healthy for me in my unique health condition. I have diabetes, right? Or I have hypertension or whatever I'm dealing with, and what foods are going to work best for that and what foods don't. Whether that's delivery, whether that's in store, or whether that's even in fast food. There was a question around fast and convenient foods. We still have that same dynamic once we go to buy our food. Is how is what I'm going to eat, how is what I'm eating right now going to impact me, or do I have the most amount of information to kind of make that kind of choice that this particular food item is going to have a positive impact on my current health situation, or is it going to have a negative impact? And there's no regulations around that. There's no standard around that. We just kind of wiggle around and just say, well, everybody needs to eat. True, everyone does need to eat, right? But I also think that the consumer has a right to know how what they're eating impacts their health, and there's just not anything in our current food in the food industry right now that really deals with that. And that was one of the reasons why Daniel and I got involved with this. That's one of the reasons why, and in our service model, we brought in the registered dietitians, and we brought in a lot of food educational components just to try to break down that piece, to kind of allow people to get a better sense of, this is what I'm dealing with. Even peanut allergies, something as simple as a peanut allergy. You know, can you assure me that there's nothing in this? Or is there a way for me to know that there's no peanuts in this food item? That has to be explicit. And I think that should be explicit in all walks of everything that we're eating for consumers, so that they can make the best choices for their family.
I like what Khalid has said, and it's so critical. And so I won't add any more to that because he just, for me, nailed it. But I also like when DJ mentioned the behavioral health, the mental health component. Sometimes we forget that piece. But research has shown that the role of diet and nutrition on mental health and wellness is significantly correlated. You know, whether you're talking about mental, neurological, substance use disorders, which are presently present, it's becoming one of the greatest global burden of disease on society. And so whether you're talking about depression or psychopathologies, these are elevated risk comorbidities of the health hazards, such as obesity. So nutrition has been implicated in having the greatest pathology and the treatment of mental illness. So your nutrition or lack of nutrition is triggering your mental health issues. But then to address it, nutrition is the best medicine to address it if medication is not, you know, the immediate requirement. You know, sometimes you have severe issues, you gotta get medicated, and then you can wean yourself off. I'm not saying don't do medication, but I'm saying work with your doctor, focus on nutrition as well as other solutions. And so with that being said, you know, the good news is this: we know it's linked. It triggers issues. It can treat the issue, but it is modifiable. It's a risk factor that we all agree in the research that we can change, or we can reduce the burden of mental health issue for the individual. So why aren't we? Why aren't we? And so Family Tree Market for us, we really are focused on health and wellness, mental illness, as well as overall physical wellness.
Thank you
Can I go
very
ahead
much.
and also,
I think that this group could talk all night long and just continue going. It's been an amazing conversation. I do want to ask one last question to the panelists that was in the chat. What would be your dream food vision for the Park Hill Golf Course? And what needs to change to make that happen? So that's kind of a big question. If we could keep our answers somewhat short, just for the sake of time and respecting everybody's evenings. So Flor, how about you? You want to start with that?
Sure. Well, I'm really grateful to be here and be part of this conversation. First of all, great to talk with y'all. I do believe that we need to put some serious investment into connecting with our local farmers, our local producers, retailers, restaurants, all the people involved in the food system, to really try to create the pathways necessary for a local food system to actually exist. And so I believe that the Park Hill Golf Course has the potential to be a place not only to produce food, with the amount of land that's available there, but to also experiment with all of these different concepts to really try to understand what it would actually take to create that infrastructure. And so in one hand, as a grower, I really would love to be able to grow food and have community there and participate in that process. And then on the other hand, as a person who's really wanting to create those food systems, I really believe that there's a potential there with that space and with the amount of attention and eyes that are on this work that's happening to co-create whatever that vision looks like with the people who are passionate about this. So I don't think this conversation ends here. I think that we need to continue gathering and moving this momentum forward and really making the agreement to listen to the community and be present with what people really want to see, invest in it, and continue hearing what community needs. And so that's my take on it.
Thank you. Anybody else want to add to that?
Yeah, if I could, please.
Sure.
Thank you. So adding to what Flor has added there, I think urban farms have always been this way of reclaiming space, and it's a way in which we reclaim community space, dealing especially with spatial politics. That's pretty important. So it's a way in which many of us come to these spaces for different reasons, right? But what we know for sure with the East Denver Food Hub, what we're trying to do is create market stability for local small to medium scale farmers and be able to help them with the distribution aspect after they grow product. And we want to really emphasize and work with people who adhere to fair growing practices and principles and treat their employees fairly, pay them a fair wage, right? And with that, also a really good thing that we're really working on hard is also advocating for policies to be able to support this system, this new system that we're trying to make. So one of the things we're working hard is making institutional contracts for people who have urban farms or grow foods, for them to be able to have a contract and a continual way to put that into the local hands of people, and being able to really provide the jobs for people in those own communities to be able to have a decent wage, to be able to have dignity in their work. So we're really trying to change the conversation around that, and it has to do a lot with some of the historical things that we've inherited, right? Going back to the very origins of this country, what farm workers, along with other groups of workers, have been excluded from the certain protections, what that deals with, right? And we're really ready to move on beyond that. But thank you for having us tonight. I appreciate the organizers and all the rest of the panelists.
Thank you, Salvador. Ricardo, I know that what would Bondadosa like to see at the golf course?
I think Bondadosa would like to see what Park Hill wants to see. First and foremost, like co-creating what that food system looks like is going to be essential here. We believe that the problem is defined by the person it impacts the most. That's the neighborhood. That's the community. And so we want to co-create with the community to do that. But selfishly, I'd like to see that $38 be spent per month on local procurement of food per person in Park Hill. And that's about 30,000 people, and that's $1.1 million that should be generating revenue for local farming and local manufacturers of food. Why not? That's our vision. Again, 30,000 residents, $38 per month. Let's get that money flowing to local economies, and then let's get that delivered to every single resident. Let's just call it what I'm gonna call it a cloud-based Costco membership for Park Hill. Why not? Everyone, a Park Hill resident gets a membership where $38 gets spent on local procurement of food, and it gets delivered to their door. That's the vision. Like that, if it could be that easy, I'd love to speak it into existence, but we will see. And I'd love if the folks here help us do that. I'd love it if the folks help us do that.
Thank you. Any last words from the panel in regards to the golf course and what they'd like to see with the vision?
I'd like to, on the food vision part, in a word, more comprehensive would be, when we think of food, when I think of food, I think of the end game, which is health outcomes. So, for me, it's improved health outcomes as the ultimate measure. But to do that, that requires a collaborative approach. And that's a bunch of groups working together, whether that's your urban farms, whether that's community kitchens, that's all of us pulling the same way. And, we're privileged to work with Montbello and the Fresh Flow Hub. And the beauty there is that is a community-led development, and community is constantly inputting into what this is and what that is. I think a lot of times communities look at the development as the enemy, or they look at them as a separatory condition, when really the community needs more voice in how these developments should work, what should be in these particular developments. And having gone through parts of that, I'm even bigger fan of it now. And so, as the Holleran Group kind of takes on this mission and takes on this effort, I mean, they need your input, they need your support, they need they need to collaborate with understand. I think this is a step in that particular direction, but we can't just be on the other side of the plan, where we're just getting impacted by it, right? But when I say comprehensive, I'm really talking about the community getting involved with how this development makes the most sense, and our developers really taking that step forward to say to opening up to the community, to kind of saying, what are the parts that we need to kind of see in here to make this really work the right way. And I think when that happens, when you have development work pulling in the right direction, you have the businesses in that particular development pulling in the right direction, you have the community's input and everybody's pulling in the right direction, I think you can have that end game of improved health outcomes and positive communal impacts.
Yeah, I just want to add on top of that, we have to all understand through looking at examples, looking at the research, to realize just providing food access in your community alone is not enough to actually see a change in behavior and therefore a healthy outcome. So access alone is not enough. So even though you can get a Safeway one day to just plop right in the middle of the store, you'll still, if you follow the people utilizing the store, you'll still see the same adverse health effects, if not even greater, because now they have more access to more of the bad choices, right? And so it is more of a complex process that is easily managed, again, through partnership. And that's one of the pieces that we're looking at Family Tree Market, is recognizing that access alone is not enough, but there's a lot of things that we have to do at the community level, with the education, with the food demonstration, with the pricing strategy, with the product placing strategy. There's so many different components, characteristics, that when you implement it, then you'll actually get to change in people's behavior, and it will be sustainable, and it will be accessible and affordable. And so again, don't just put any solution in your community. It has to be a business that's willing to modify its business approach to meet the unique needs of the community, because it has already been demonstrated that when communities come in with their existing model and they don't adapt to the local community, it opens and closes shortly after. So just wanted to keep that point out there.
Hey, yeah, I'll say a little bit before y'all close it up. On the real, on GP player, make sure that joint's LEED certified player. Make sure that you at least got the rooftop with the greens on the top. You know what I'm saying? You got like the green wall and all that. You got the composting, you got the recycling, got some traceable source. Sprinkle some sprouts or a juice bar up in there. Make sure it's traceable source, organic options. You know what I mean? And then on the real, I think what's important, player, is we got to start putting the food stuff on blast. I know not everybody want to go plant-based. I get it. You know what I mean? But on the real, the additives is real, man. Yeah. That's why having, traceable sources is like real important. I want everybody real quick, pull up your phone, pull up your jack, and Google what food products have the ingredient HEK293, just to start. HEK Hex 293 cells, yo. Tell me what you think about that. Now this right here is gonna bug you out, but not enough people know what's in their food. And so by the reason why I grow food, the reason I'm like that, I mean, I'm featured in this upcoming book called Brother Vegan. Go check it out. A friend of mine named Omiwale, who's an athlete, who has been trying to inspire people to like know what's going on with their food additives. You know what I mean? Know what's going on with your traceable source. The reason why we're trying to encourage people to grow food is a whole nother, but LEED certified for the building, definitely imperative. These young folks, they ain't gonna have nothing else, bro. You already know, man. They want to make sure that it's good for you, good for the planet, and that we're able to sequester carbon in urban atmospheres, especially where we have a lot of carbon emission. So keep that in mind, homie.
Yes,
Just saying.
yes, absolutely. That's good stuff. And we call it net positive impact. That is important.
I go bug out when y'all reach that HEK 293 though. That's just a sprinkle of like food additives that a lot of people need to start watching out for. This is the reason why I stay in the soil, player. Just saying.
I think that's probably a great place to end. Norman, I'm going to kick it over to you. Thank you so much for letting me be a part of this.
Thank you, Darcie, and my good friend DJ Cavem. We're gonna have all of that. Let me just take a step back. I just want to thank everybody for being here. I know we went a little bit over time. Thank you so much, Darcie, again for hosting this panel. I think you did a wonderful job of just directing this conversation. I was getting text messages the whole time this was happening, sincerely, and I just appreciate everyone being on this call and bringing what you brought to the table. I do want to take my minute here to just probably talk to you all about what's really at stake here. Because we do have folks that are on the other side of the table that I sit on that are saying that we shouldn't even be having a conversation, that that Park Hill and the folks that live in Northeast Park Hill actually have good food choices, right? And I go back to my example of me growing up on 35th and Eudora and the choices that I have, and I go there now and I look and there are less. And so I ask you how a 18-hole golf course has helped develop the people in Northeast Park Hill, and I just don't think it has. And I think there's so much more that we can be doing better with the land. And we're having a conversation about that. But what I really want everyone to know is what's at stake right now is that there is a voice out there that is saying that we shouldn't have this conversation, that we shouldn't be talking about addressing needs that have been impacting our community for generations. Now, today we focused on food, but imagine what happens when you couple these issues with lack of affordable housing, lack of transportation, lack of good education, single parent homes, gang violence, liquor, drugs. What type of environment are we living in? So when we start talking about what we can do with the Park Hill Golf Course, is we can address a lot of the needs that our community has. And so I think it's so important that we have these conversations, we continue to have these conversations, because I am listening and I'm assuring that we are going to get this right. And in order for us to do this, we need everyone to join in with us, because we're all at the table. We all have a voice. We all need to speak up, step up. So I saw a text or something in the chat that was asking for follow-ups. What I'm asking everyone to do is tomorrow, the city and county of Denver is actually hosting a virtual public open house for the Park Hill Golf Course visiting process. There's going to be some brief presentations by, I think, the city staff and Denver Metro Community Impact, followed by time for Q&A. And I'm trying to ask each one of you who have been listening and a part of this panel to share your thoughts, because we have to have these conversations. Our folks deserve better. If you want to take that a step further, I'm asking you to go look for our Park Hill Golf Course Reimagined website and ask for a yard sign to be delivered. I'll come and deliver it to your home myself, so we can have this conversation even further. We are trying to bring more folks to the table. This isn't easy. I got, this is not easy, but I appreciate everyone being here. And we're going to continue to do this hard work. So thank you so much. And I look forward to seeing you all again. God bless you.